Hello, everyone. Our last speaker spoke to us about how they rode the healthcare wave this year to expand Medicaid, an incredible accomplishment. Well, many of our healthcare heroes at the conference achieved incredible wins this year. Others are achieving the healthcare hero designation for defending our big wins. I am proud to introduce to you the ultimate healthcare defender, Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosh. Attorney General Brian Frosh is a healthcare hero because not only does he defend healthcare coverage and rights for the residents of his own state of Maryland, but through his actions, he is defending healthcare for our entire nation. When President Trump refused to defend the Affordable Care Act and the Texas versus U.S. lawsuit, Attorney General Frosh was not having it. Attorney General Frosh filed a lawsuit last September against the Trump administration, seeking a judgment that the Affordable Care Act is constitutional and that the federal government must stop taking actions to dismantle it. But that's not all that he has done to defend Maryland and our country against healthcare sabotage. He has partnered with other states to sue the Trump administration over its rules that undermine access to contraceptive care. He has banded together with other states to sue the Trump administration for its association health plans that undermine real comprehensive coverage. But at Families USA, there is another reason that we see Attorney General Frosh as a healthcare hero. In recent years, as more and more consumers come to us, sharing stories of the huge burden that high and rising prescription drug costs cause, our organization has expanded our focus deeply on what we can do to address the high and rising costs of prescription drugs. We're building a national consumer coalition to combat prescription drug price increases, and we're working with many of you in states all across the nation to pass laws that will crack down on unregulated price increases and prescription drug price gouging. Attorney General Frosh is a pioneer in efforts to address the high cost of prescription drugs at the state level. In 2017, Maryland's General Assembly enacted first of its kind state legislation to combat prescription drug price gouging. But you won't be surprised to hear that pharma sued the state over this. Attorney General Frosh is now defending the state's right to protect its residents from prescription drug price gouging. And he is taking this fight all the way to the Supreme Court. We are calling Attorney General Frosh a healthcare hero, but we must acknowledge that he is also a hero to so many other causes: immigration, the environment, housing, consumer financial protections. He defends every single part of our lives. In fact, Attorney General Frosh has sued the Trump administration over 20 times. So without further ado, it is an honor to introduce to you, defender of healthcare and beyond, Maryland Attorney General Brian Frosh.
When I see your face, there's not a thing that I would change, 'cause you're amazing.
Well, Claire, thank you very much for the kind words. I'd really like to meet that guy sometime. Thank you to Families USA and to all of you for the great work that you do in protecting health care for everyone in the United States. Our work is very similar to yours. We do it every day. We're fighting to get health care that Marylanders need and deserve, and we do it on a number of different levels. And I want to talk about Trump, but I want to tell you what we do just in Maryland first. We have a health education advocacy unit. Kim Camerata is the head of it. I think she's here today. We get thousands of calls every year from folks who are having trouble with their insurance companies, their doctors, their hospitals. And we're able to mediate those problems, those complaints, and return millions of dollars, about $3 million a year, to Marylanders who are experiencing these difficulties. Just to give you one example, and this is one that Kim worked on personally, we got a call from the family of a guy who needed an organ transplant. He had a live donor who was ready to fly from across the country. He had a medical team, he had a hospital, and a date for the surgery. And had a hiccup with his insurance. Literally, Kim had 48 hours in which to negotiate with the insurance company, the IRS, the HHS, our Department of Health, the hospital, the insurance company, and we managed to put it together so that his operation went off on time. I want to tell you another story about one of our cases. It's about a woman named Vonda. Vonda was suffering from advanced stage cancer. West Virginia resident in a Maryland nursing home, the NMS nursing home in Hagerstown, Maryland. And she was so sick that she had lost 40% of her body weight. She weighed about 85 pounds. She had a tracheostomy, so she had difficulty speaking, difficulty ambulating. And the nursing home said, "We're throwing you out." She said, "Wait a minute, Medicaid's paying for my stay here." They said, "If you don't leave, we're going to call the police." So she got into a car that they had provided with a woman she didn't know, who took her to Baltimore, a place she'd never been, put her in a townhouse with a couple of other very sick people, took away her West Virginia benefits card, and began using it. This woman she didn't know began using it for herself, and in the meantime, fed Vonda ramen noodles and water. And after a couple of weeks, Vonda figured out how to turn off the benefits card. And when she did, she was physically abused by the woman who was supposed to be taking care of her. This woman put her in a car, took her to the nearest homeless shelter, and dumped her there. The homeless shelter recognized that since she hadn't had any of her medicine for 2 weeks, she was in serious trouble, and they took her to the emergency room, which saved her life. We found on investigation that this nursing home, there was a chain of 5 nursing homes, NMS homes. They represented about 2% of the nursing home beds in the state of Maryland, but had issued 70% of the involuntary discharge notices, eviction notices. And we found and alleged in the lawsuit that we brought against them that they were throwing people out when they went off Medicare reimbursement, which pays about $550 a day, and went on to Medicaid reimbursement, which is about $250 a day. As I said, we sued them, we sued the individuals who were running the place, and a couple of months ago, that litigation was settled. They are out of business in the state of Maryland. The people who are running the joint are barred from being involved in nursing homes ever in the state of Maryland, and they paid the state $2.2 million for their misdeeds. As Claire said, we also are fighting to keep the cost of prescription drugs down. And we've partnered with Vinnie DeMarco, who is a great champion of healthcare. His Healthcare for All organization does an outstanding job. And we found in 2016 that the price of generic drugs, one of the greatest bargains in American healthcare for generations, the price had begun to skyrocket. And we looked at a study that was done by the Government Accountability Office. They looked at a basket of about 1,400 of the most common generic drugs and found that more than 300 of them had experienced what GAO called an extraordinary price increase within the past 5 years. And by extraordinary, they meant 100% or more. There was another study done by the U.S. Senate Committee on Aging. They looked at a narrower band of off-patent and generic drugs and found price increases of 1,000%, 2,000%, 5,000%. The U.S. Senate Committee on Aging concluded that in the cases of these extraordinary price increases, the cause was price gouging. Pure and simple. The drugs were 30, 40, 60 years old. The costs of research and development had long been recovered, but the prices were out of sight. we, working with Vinnie, we put together legislation that prohibits price gouging. It simply says that if a generic company or off-patent, somebody making off-patent or generic drugs has an unconscionable price increase, and unconscionable means that it shocks the conscience, the Attorney General can go into court and enjoin that price increase. We had an epic battle with the pharmaceutical industry. I don't think I'd seen a more expensive collection of suits in many years, but we prevailed. The law was passed. And no sooner than it went into effect than the Generic Drug Association sued me, as well as the state of Maryland. And we won the first round in federal district court and lost the second round in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and we are now petitioning for certiorari in the US Supreme Court. I just want to give you one example. There's a drug called Daraprim. It's used to treat toxoplasmosis and AIDS, and if you need Daraprim, you really need it. There are some folks for whom no other drugs will treat those diseases. And the price of Daraprim was taken over by a hedge fund CEO, and he raised the price from $13.50 a pill to $750 a pill. This guy's name was Martin Shkreli. He's the pharma bro. You may have heard of him. He was summoned down to Capitol Hill to testify, and some enterprising congressman said to him, "Mr. Shkreli, why did you raise the price from $13 a pill to $750 a pill?" And he said, "Because I can." And our response to that is, no, you can't, not in our state. We are also involved in litigation. We filed a price-fixing lawsuit with other attorneys general across the country against 18 generic drug manufacturers. And in the complaint, we allege that they got together, carved up the market, said, you take CVS, you take Walmart, I'll take Ohio, you can have Tennessee. And they just jacked up the prices of their products. The complaint, if you have quite a bit of time to read it, it's about 200 pages long, has lots of examples of emails that went back and forth among these competitors. And the emails, we allege, show a clear plan and to fix prices and to cheat the consumers. One of the most telling things, I think, is that there was one manufacturer that had more than 1,500 emails and telephone calls to its competitors in a one-year period. Suppliers, that makes sense. Customers, I get that too. 1,500 communications with competitors, that's highly unusual. That case is pending. We're very optimistic that we're going to get recoveries from all of these manufacturers to help reimburse the folks in our states that they've cheated. Now, I'm sure that some of you were as surprised as I was on November 8th, 2016, and perhaps some of you were as disappointed as I was when Donald Trump was elected president. I got an email from a friend of mine. He's a historian who lives in Massachusetts, the morning after. And he pointed out to me that the same night that Trump was elected, Massachusetts legalized marijuana. And he said, I guess the message is when they go low, we get high. Not sure it's working out that well. But, 1 week into office, Donald Trump issued the first Muslim ban executive order. And the state of Maryland, the Attorney General of Maryland, is different from all of the other AGs in the country. The AG in Maryland doesn't have what are called common law powers. So that means that in order for me to bring suit to protect Marylanders, I have to go ask the governor for permission, or I have to get a bill passed by the General Assembly. And our governor is a Republican, Larry Hogan, and when Trump issued the first Muslim ban executive order, I sent him a letter and said, let me sue, this is unconstitutional. Also stupid, but unconstitutional. And I got nothing back. Couldn't get a response, couldn't get an answer. So I turned to the General Assembly and I asked them to pass legislation to give me the power to protect Marylanders from Trump. And they're in session for only 90 days a year. And it takes them about 75 days to clear their collective throats. But on this one, they passed a bill that gave me the authority within 2 weeks. And we were in court by the time Trump issued his second Muslim ban executive order with other AGs from across the country. And we've been in court ever since. I mean, not just on Muslim ban, but to protect our environment, to protect kids, students who are being cheated by for-profit predatory institutions, and many other causes. But a number of them relate to health care. And first, Donald Trump decided that employers, not the women in their employ, should decide whether these women are entitled to contraceptive coverage, family planning coverage. We think that's unconstitutional. We filed suit with other AGs, and in December, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals continued the injunction that had been issued against the Trump administration for this policy. We sued when Trump refused to pay the cost share reductions that are integral to the Affordable Care Act. The case was winding its way through the courts when some creative folks in Maryland and elsewhere figured out a way to do an end run around the cost share reductions, a workaround that essentially made sure that the individuals who were receiving ACA insurance would still have their co-payments reduced without having need for the cost share reductions. We sued the Trump administration over the skinny health insurance plan, the one that is like bait for folks who think they're healthy, or folks who are just willing to take a risk that they're not going to get sick. These skinny plans suck some of the healthiest, best insurance risks out of the general pool, and therefore raise the cost for everybody else. That lawsuit on cross motions for summary judgment is being heard today down the street in the district court for the District of Columbia. And as Claire mentioned, we joined forces. Well, when Trump, there are a number of Republican attorneys general who filed suit in Texas. They found a district that has only one judge. They know this guy is sympathetic to their cause. They filed suit in Texas saying that the Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional. And a number of Democratic AGs intervened in that lawsuit, and we filed a separate action in Maryland asking for the obverse kind of relief. We asked the judge to declare that the Affordable Care Act is constitutional. The judge in Texas recently issued, I think, a very poorly reasoned decision holding the whole Affordable Care Act has to fall. It's unconstitutional. We had a hearing in December on our case. Our judge has it under advisement, and we are awaiting her ruling. We're very optimistic. I'll talk about one final lawsuit that I think involves the most despicable conduct that I have seen in my lifetime exercised by the Trump administration, and that is the policy of separating children from their families. And this relates to health care, of course, for all of the people who are being held in detention. But there is nothing that is more damaging to a child than disrupting his or her life and taking them away from their parents. And the thing that's most despicable about this is they didn't do it for national security. They didn't do it for public safety. They did it, and they admit this, they did it because they thought it would be a deterrent to people who were seeking to come to the United States, who were fleeing danger in their own countries or starving in their own countries. You know that that policy was enjoined by the U.S. district courts and courts of appeal. The judge ordered that Trump reunite the families, reunite the children with their parents. And in the past couple of weeks, we found out that there are thousands more kids that were separated than they initially disclosed. The administration, when it was hit with this order to reunite the kids, it was a forehead-smacking moment for them. They hadn't thought about that. They hadn't thought about, what a hospital does as a general rule. You put an armband around somebody with their identification, wristband with their identification on it, so they know whose kid is whose and whose parent is whose. Didn't do any of that stuff. We are going to continue to pursue the administration to make sure that every child is reunited with his or her family. And let me say in closing that these are the darkest times that I have seen in my life. And the only thing that's remotely comparable was the period in the 1960s when we were in the middle of the struggle for civil rights and we were in the middle of the Vietnam War. And Bobby Kennedy was running for president in 1968. And he was to give a speech in Indianapolis. And a couple of hours before his speech, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And people didn't know. I mean, there was no internet in those days, no cell phones. And Kennedy wanted to tell the crowd, and the Secret Service feared for his life. They strongly urged him to leave, not to speak at all. He insisted. He went out, and he told the crowd that King had been murdered. And you can hear in the recording of it an audible gasp, a collective gasp, and some cries. But Kennedy went on to say this: what we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion for one another and a feeling of justice towards those who still suffer in our country. That's what my office stands for. That's what we're fighting for. We look forward to continuing to work with you in the great work that you do. Thank you very much for having me here today.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kimberly Aline, Families USA's Senior Director